out to all actors to support CSOs and the positions on EDC. To achieve these objectives, what we did is to gather our collective practices and experiences in advocacy, project management, as well as network management, and we reflected these in our new series of capacity development materials, which we are presenting to you today. We aim to build a community of best practices so we can learn from one another in improving our policy advocacy and our collaboration with other actors and stakeholders in advancing effective development cooperation. So today, we will also listen to some of our colleagues who will discuss the challenges that we have faced and the lessons that we have learned in these aspects of our work. We have been challenged and we are being challenged at the moment because of the COVID-19 pandemic, not only in our operations, but also in fighting for and reclaiming our civic spaces, as well as the freedom of thought and expression from our societies. We have fought on to continue working on our own effectiveness and to engage our advocacy arenas to make our messages on development effectiveness and sustainable development heard, but also to work on monitoring and sustainable development in order to not to leave anyone behind. Therefore, we invite you to actively participate in today's discussions as we, as a platform, continue to develop our capacities in order to develop a higher level of practice and effectiveness in policy advocacy and organizational practice to advance in EDC from the country to the regional and global level. So thank you very much for your participation. And here we start this launch. Thank you, Josephine.
Opening remarks. Now we will give the floor to Roberto Pinoy, our Executive Secretary. I hope you're getting me correctly. I seem to have an unstable internet connection. Who will introduce us to the background to this event. Roberto, please.
Yes, there seems to be some issues with your sound, but yeah, thanks, Joe. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, from whatever part of the world you are. On behalf of the Global Secretariat, we thank you for taking the time to join us in this online launch of CPDE's capacity development materials. I've been tasked to give some background, so let me start from the big picture. 2022 is a significant year for the world. This is the year we are finally starting to see the light at the end of the long, dark, and treacherous pandemic tunnel. Well, I am sure that one and all grieve some loss or misfortune in the last 2 years. It's as if this year, it's all right to start to feel good again about the future. As countries and economies start to open up, we are starting to rebuild our societies. Personally, I hope we do this with care, bearing in mind that the former world order has brought us to such dire circumstances in the first place. In the same light, 2022 is a significant year for CPDE. The year marks the Alliance's decade-long work in effective development cooperation. This year, emerging from the pandemic, we are taking all measures to bounce back and regain whatever advocacy and program implementation momentum we have lost in the last 2 years. This year, we also intend to fully realize our country work, to domesticate the effective development cooperation agenda at the local level where it matters the most. The capacity development materials we are now sharing to the world is one of the first milestones to celebrate our 10 years in existence. As will be explained more eloquently by my colleagues later, these tools capture the learning of our partnership in key areas of work, network and project management, and in advocacy. Thus, I will not spoil what was prepared except to say that I hope you receive this as meaningful products of our collective work, that you seize the opportunity to use this to further and broaden and solidify our ranks and fulfill our mandate to serve those whose rights are most threatened and bore the brunt of the pandemic. 10 years ago, CSO leaders from all over the world launched CPDE. The mission was to promote development effectiveness in all areas of work, both on our own and the work of others, guided by human rights-based approach. This 2022, as the world starts to emerge from the ravages of the pandemic, many are still reeling from the impact to their lives and livelihood. The challenge before us is daunting, but we believe that effective development cooperation has a role to play to ensure just recovery. As we celebrate 10 years of fulfilling this mission, I hope we strengthen our resolve to advance CSO leadership, positions, and actions on development effectiveness through sustained multi-stakeholder partnerships in different arenas, principled consensus building, and systematic advocacy work, all of which are being discussed in these capacity development materials and resources. And I hope we give special attention to the needs of the Global South and the people in them. I hope these tools help us to do just that. I look forward to more solid years of solidarity with you and your constituencies on effective development, cooperation, and practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert, and for that very inspiring message on how to move forward, how to become more positive again after more than 2 years of difficulties, not only with our operations but also in how to live our lives as well. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm Glennis, and I'm from the Capacity Development Team. Joe and I will work together in the hosting as Joe tries to fix her internet connection. And for that, I would like to invite the presentation of our logos. As Robert mentioned earlier, we are celebrating our 10 years of existence, of advocacy, and of good practices. Hello, can we have the logos, please? Okay, so at this point, we can look at that later. So at this point, we are proud to present some communications material, a video in fact, that will introduce us to the products, the capacity development materials that we are launching today. So please, may I have the honor and the pleasure to present to you our capacity development materials, the project management guide, the network management guide, and the advocacy toolkit.
CSO Partnership for Development Effectiveness, we believe it's extremely important and useful to share our perspectives and best practices. As a platform made up of civil society organizations or CSOs across over 100 countries, we have plenty of collective experience. This collective experience and know-how have been combined to create a series of capacity development materials. we are pleased to present to you CPDE's first ever project management guide and training modules for CSOs called Demonstrating Results and Accountability, the CPDE Program Management Experience. The guide and training modules on project management are intended for CPDE members and other CSOs planning to implement a project on effective development cooperation. A needs assessment exercise with CPDE members helped inform the development of this module. The learning content was thus developed by CSOs for CSOs to effectively manage programs and demonstrate results in their EDC projects. It provides learners with templates and strategies to handle every stage of the project lifecycle. The training modules are offered along with the guide so that CSOs, educators, and community leaders can adapt the course to their local context. Depending on the needs of the course conveners, the training modules can be adapted to be taught face-to-face, virtually, or in a hybrid mode. The course has been designed to be taught over 3 modules in 2 sessions, but is flexible for adaptation. CPDE is here to provide technical guidance if needed. Let us walk you through the contents of the material. Part 1 of the guide provides a historical snapshot of CPDE's effective development cooperation work. This section clarifies the link between programs and policy advocacy and discusses the relevance of effective project management in CPDE. Part 2 looks at the project planning stage, including the strategies to define the problem and its relevance. It also discusses the value of having a clear theory of change and how it can aid in the other components of project management, especially in monitoring, evaluation, and co-learning. Part 3 discusses the various project management dimensions. It examines principles and strategies for managing scope, time, costs and grants, quality, human resources, procurement, communications, and risks. Finally, Part 4 discusses monitoring and evaluation, or M&E. It starts with the principle of results-based management and discusses the relevance of the logical framework, or log frame analysis. This section also provides recommendations on establishing an effective M&E strategy for organizations using the log frame. By tapping into the already rich skills and knowledge of CSOs, the goal is to bolster projects that work towards effective development cooperation and, in doing so, strengthen our civil society platform.
In this video, we will talk about the Network Management Guide and Training Modules to Advance Effective Development Cooperation, or EDC. This guide offers CPDE members and other CSOs the tools, resources, and practical guidance to improve their operations and organizational practices. Training modules are offered along with a guide so that civil society organizations, educators, and community leaders can teach the modules in their local contexts. CPD is here to provide technical guidance if needed. Depending on the needs of the course conveners, the training modules can be adapted to be taught face-to-face, virtually, or in hybrid mode. Also, the course has been designed to be taught over 4 sessions, but is flexible for adaptation. Amongst the materials, you will find theoretical concepts, case studies, lesson plans, and worksheets. Here is an overview of the Network Management Guide. The first module introduces learners to basic network management concepts and describes basic networking and partnership principles. It also discusses the organizational life cycle and stages of a network. The second module covers network management for advocacy networks, providing an overview of how advocacy networks function and the different structures and strategies for organizing advocacy networks. The third module hones in on CPDE as an advocacy network. In this module, learners will refresh their knowledge on the EDC framework and the 6 areas that CPDE works on. Also, they will delve into the different frameworks and approaches CPDE works with, including EDC, the human rights-based approach, and the feminist approach, and how they are implemented. The fourth and final module will put all the reflection and theory into practice. Participating organizations will draw out an action plan to advance their network management goals. By the end of the guide and training modules, organizations will have enriched their grasp of various approaches, attitudes, and behaviors to help them reflect on their policies and practices. But more importantly, the network management guide and training modules were designed so that all the reflection and planning done during the learning period will lead to meaningful action that transforms and fortifies participants' networks relations. After all, CSOs need to work together and as a movement to build lasting change. Collaboration and coordination among CSOs through partnerships and networks are necessary to challenge unequal power relations and strive for a development model that is oriented towards eliminating poverty and reducing inequality.
In their role as independent development actors, CSOs aim to help bring about policies that respond to people's needs. From the ground up to the high-level meetings, the advocacy work can take many forms. These should be effectively planned and designed to generate the change they want. The CSO Partnership's Advocacy Toolkit was designed to support CSOs within and outside the platform to advocate for various causes: human rights, social justice, decent work, gender equality, environmental sustainability, and democratic processes in development cooperation. This toolkit provides CSOs with the necessary information, guidance, practical tools, and step-by-step process to build and carry out an advocacy initiative for effective development cooperation in specific local context. So, what can we expect from this toolkit? To begin, this toolkit covers relevant information on EDC, including its principles, arenas of engagement, and applications. It also defines what advocacy is and goes through the CPDE policy cycle process. Then, from theory to practice, let us guide you through a step-by-step process to set your agenda, formulate your advocacy messages, implement your action plan, and eventually monitor and evaluate your activity. Each step of this process includes a series of practical activities that will help you and your team design your advocacy action in the most impactful way, tailored to your local context, audience, desired outcomes, and aligned with your organization's goals. Together, let's advance effective development cooperation through impactful advocacy actions.
For more information and to download the guides and training modules, visit the resources page of our website, csopartnership.org.
Can everyone hear me properly now? I hope so, and I hope that the connection fixed. Great, thank you. Thank you also to my colleagues for those videos. I hope everyone got the message through. And as mentioned by Danny, lastly, the materials will be accessible through the CPDE webpage and translated into French, Spanish, and English, of course. So what you're seeing now in the screen, it's our logo that's been designed to celebrate a decade of action in development effectiveness agenda. This is the first time we're sharing it, so proudly to introduce this logo and also to share with everyone that this will be a year where we will be focusing a lot on reivindicating also all of the work that has been done, all of the years working together to advocate for this agenda, the outcomes, the challenges, but also the results that we've managed to grow together. So having the modules being introduced by these brief videos, we will now give the floor to our three speakers that will be sharing some inputs on challenges and lessons learned on the different areas of work. So initially, we would like to invite Mark Ignacio, our Deputy Program Manager, to discuss or to share a little bit on what it has been like for him to implement project management within the CPDE platform. Mark?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'll be sharing a bit on the CPDE project management experience, particularly focusing on some of the challenges and and um, troubleshooting practices that were done, in the implementation of the programs in the past 10 years of CPDE. Next slide, please. So yeah, I'll be focusing on the challenges and the troubleshooting practices, particularly because the guide is already filled with information, theoretical information on project management, including tips on how to manage the different stages of the projects. So next slide. I will just be focusing on four challenges that CPDE experienced in the past 10 years in managing the program. So first is the cycle of delays in plans and reports. And this tells a lot about CPDE's capacity to comply with its obligations to donors. And in those 10 years, I think even members will attest to it that there were some issues in implementation, no, and these were particularly due to a vicious cycle of delay, no, that when partners would submit would be delayed in submitting their plans, no, it would lead to a delay in implementation as well as a delay in reports, no, which are usually um, prerequisites to donor approvals, no, most of the time. And these approvals are also tied to the fund transfers, which in turn delays implementation if there's this cycle of delay. No. Uh, so second is monitoring the alignment of partners' activities and outputs to the overall program framework. CPDE values as one of as CPDE adheres to the principle of ownership. No, we would want our partners, and members to have ownership in their activities and the outputs that they produce in relation to the programs. No, however, we also need to balance these these aspirations with regard to the program promises, no? And so CPDE will need to, particularly the Global Secretariat, will need to ensure that the scope is managed and that the activities of partners will still fall within the parameters of the projects, no? So there are times when activities would go beyond the actual fund allocation, no? And there are also times when activities do not necessarily fall within the program objectives, and so the Global Secretariat uh, will have to make sure that these things are managed, no, and will still contribute to the program promises. Third is coordinating multiple program partners. So as we adhere to the principle of inclusiveness and broad representation within the platform, CPDE is currently has a partnership with organizations from 6 regions and 8 sectors, no, and also at least 12 countries through its country initiatives framework, no. And the challenge in doing this particularly is making sure that the organizations whom we partner with are competent, no, to manage the grants that that we have basically for the implementation of the program. Finally, one of the main challenges, a recurring challenge actually up until now, is the fund transfer issues due to blacklisted countries. No, some countries have strict financial restrictions, and in some, actually, this is a form of shrinking civic space. No, and we would really want to make sure that we are able to troubleshoot this kind of issue, because we want to demonstrate the efficiency of our internal control and management systems. No, so these 4 challenges, no, that we faced over the years are just some of the challenges that we faced. And next slide, please. And what we did basically was to troubleshoot them. No, so for instance, in these delays, no, in managing the delays, we've set up and implemented measures for compliance and accountability. So currently we have a compliance measures policy, no, that is being implemented to make sure that program partners submit their reports and plans on time, and so as to stop the cycle of delays. On monitoring the alignment, we've systematized our review process for plans and reports, ensuring that there is a documentation of feedback to the submissions of partners. And also, we've provided guidelines and planning and implementation guidelines to our partners to make sure that they will be planning along the lines of the parameters of the project. Last slide, please. On the third issue of coordinating multiple partners, so we've systematized as well our assessment of the financial management organization within CPDE. And this includes a request for a number of documents from them, including registration and such, so that we will be able to assess more systematically their capacities. And also during implementation, in order to avoid the delays as well, we conduct bilateral consultations with our program partners. And lastly, on troubleshooting fund transfer, this has been made possible by our partners as well, that they act as third party, to where funds can be channeled, no? And they will be the ones sending these monies on behalf of the Global Secretariat. So yeah, that's it. That's the challenges and the troubleshooting practices that we've faced over the years, and some of these are actually in the guide as well. You may ask your questions later. That's all. Thank you. Over, Joe.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, we will open up the floor for questions later. This has been very interesting to hear also on very specific ways of addressing some of the issues you were mentioning. We will now give the floor to Novska. I hope I got anywhere near to pronounce it that correctly. Simona, she's the communications officer for the Balkan Civil Society Development Network. And she will be sharing with us some of her own experiences facing network management challenges. Simona, please go ahead.
Hello by my side, and Josefina, thank you. You pronounced my name and surname right. Thank you. So I'm really happy to be here. This is actually my second time addressing on a CPD event, and the last time I got the chance to speak about the good practices as network. So not many things, I guess, have changed since my last address. So what I have mentioned in my previous address overlaps a bit with what am I gonna say next. So yes, networks, okay. Networks bring together a variety of experiences. They bring leverage in front of decision makers. They build general trust amongst different communities. But all of these upsides when working as a network and acting as a network are applicable only when network manages to bring their membership on the same page. And I'm not really talking about differences in the core values and principles according to which the membership of the network acts. I'm talking more in a sense of different level of internal capacities, different levels of donor dependence, different experiences with stakeholders and decision makers. But once the network manages to teach its members to learn from each other's experiences, once they strengthening the common positions on issues such as the human rights approach, the identification of stakeholders and means of advocacy. Once they pave the ground and the eagerness towards practicing accountability, the success of the networks are inevitable. So to paint a bit detailed picture about what I'm talking about, and actually to convince you that at the Balkan Civil Society Network, we really do as we preach. I'm gonna dive a bit deeper into what we actually implement these activities in the areas considered effective development. Regarding the enabling environment, Bățăsădăn is consecutively been monitoring the enabling environment, actually the state of the enabling environment in the Western Balkan countries and Turkey through our flagship monitoring matrix mechanism. In addition to the building activities, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. The sound.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for a moment. I got frozen, so I was not sure if I was talking to the void.
No, I think that the sound comes through correctly, just a little bit cut at moments, but it's clear. Don't worry, it's fine. We're getting
I'm
it.
so sorry for interrupting myself. So in addition to the monitoring, what we do to support the enabling environment is also capacity building, not only to our members, but CSO in the region in general. We also provide support for regional networks and CSOs and informal networks through the region, through the Regional Civil Society Development Hub. Within the activities that we implement within the global standard for CSO accountability, we are constantly promoting, but much more importantly, continuously learning and advancing accountability. We are trying to lead by example, so we are open to see and hear our constituencies and to implement their inputs to our work, to be transparent about our work, about our successes or failures, of course, but nonetheless to continuously continue learning from the work we are doing and the accountability we're practicing. So I would once again stress that the crucial part is the constant engagement and the two-way communication, and to keep in mind the perspective that networks must contribute to the members' well-being just as much as members of their networks are contributing to the network's well-being. When managing a network, everyone's needs must be addressed in a manner that, if not universally beneficial for all the position. So I would now draw focus on our latest endeavor. We in the cooperation, the corporate giving and philanthropy, rather in the direction of promoting and protecting civic space. At this point, we are starting by gathering data and painting a bit more detailed and comprehensive picture of the current state with this cooperation in the region, so we can identify further opportunities for such cooperation to grow. So far, the membership of our network is really thrilled to pioneer in a way this kind of cooperation in the region, and we are looking forward for the next steps.
Thank you, Simona. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
No, I hope everyone was able to get the audio correctly. I know there were some moments where the audio was cutting, but I've taken notes of all the valuable advices and also experiences that you've shared. So we'll go ahead to our next speaker and then open up the floor for questions. We will have Matt Simmons, our Senior Policy and Liaison Officer, to share some of the challenges and his own experience in doing the CPDE advocacy work, or advocacy work also in general. Please, Matt.
Hi, everybody. I have a presentation. I don't know if it's going to flash on there or do I need to share screen? No, there it is. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of CPD's advocacy, how and where CPD does advocacy. And this really just comes from a toolkit that we have prepared recently, which is soon to be at the presses, I guess, and shared with everyone here. So we've got this. I see here it's been translated into French, so my presentation looks a little different. Anyway, so the first question that we have that comes up is, why do we do advocacy? And essentially, we've grouped this into sort of three rationales or categories of when and why we need to do advocacy. The first is there are no policies or laws and regulations that adequately support the participation in positions of CSOs in development cooperation. So we try to create, do advocacy to ensure or create those policies or laws. The existing policies or laws, regulations, and practices are disabling to CSOs and impact on their ability to participate and assert people's participation and inclusion in relevant political and policy making processes. So not only are there no laws, but they're actually counterproductive to CSO participation. There are laws that are counterproductive, or there are policies and laws and regulations that exist, but they're not being implemented. Of course, this is framed in terms of CSOs participation, but this is more generally can be applied to policies or laws that CSOs advocate for. So if there are no laws that their CSOs have priorities that they're not covered by existing policies or laws, we do advocacy. If there are policies that are disabling to priorities of CSOs, then we do advocacy. And likewise, if there are policies that exist but aren't being implemented on CSO priorities, we do advocacy. So what is CPDE's core business? It is effective development cooperation. And in short, effective development cooperation provides the foundation for addressing development cooperation, processes, governance, and accountability. It is a framework that's based on 4 principles, aiming to achieve genuine and inclusive development by promoting more and equal empowered partnerships and more sustainable development outcomes. These 4 principles of EDC, which hopefully everybody is very aware of, are country ownership, and we tend to qualify this as democratic country ownership, a focus on results, inclusive partnerships, and inclusive development, and transparency and mutual accountability. This principles and EDC more generally guides our work as development actors so that what we advocate for and how we deliver the results to people are done through inclusive and participatory methods, mutual accountability, and democratic ownership. So it really underpins the basis of our work and our advocacy from the global level policy setting, implementation down to our work at the grassroots. As a platform, we engage the agenda by advocating for equal representation of all different types of development actors in aid and development arenas, particularly CSO representation, and for inclusive structures of accountability for donors and, let's say, partner countries and governments. It is an ongoing multi-level political and policy process that aims to drive positive behavioral change of decision makers, bureaucracies, and development stakeholders. Multi-level meaning at, as I said, the global down to the grassroots and everything sort of in between. Our main advocacy themes that sort of fit under this broad kind of umbrella of effective development cooperation are the following. Of course, this comes directly, I should say, this comes directly from our strategic plan and our strategic policy and advocacy objectives. So our main advocacy themes, I don't know if we're up to date on that slide there, because I think that the presentation's been keep bumping forward. Still to go. It's still going forward on the slides. Sorry, folks. Again, it's a slide entitled "Our Main Advocacy Themes." So it's not this one, please. I'm sorry, I don't have control of the slide here. It's been different. Nope, we're going the wrong direction. In fact, that's going to the beginning. We need to go towards the end. Our main advocacy themes. There we go. The first is the advance of the effective development cooperation commitments, which are enshrined in the all the way dating back to the Paris Declaration through to the most recent commitments at the senior level meeting in 2019 and everything in between, as well as the means of implementation of the 2030 agenda and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, which is under the financing for development process. The second main advocacy theme that we work on is the promotion of the promotion of accountability, the specific aspect of accountability and effectiveness of private sector engagement in development partnerships. This is, while our focus is very clearly on the accountability, we understand obviously that there is some very strong reservations about the role of the private sector, especially supported by development cooperation. So that's in that is why we focus primarily on the accountability end. Obviously, our third theme would be focusing specifically on CSOs, their ability to operate, closing and shrinking space for civil society, and improving CSO partnerships and CSO's own effectiveness. Fourth theme that we work on is the promotion of the effectiveness agenda within when it comes to financing climate action for the SDGs. There's until now, these are two processes that have been moving in parallel, and we find that climate finance operates in something of a silo compared to other forms of development finance. And so we're aiming to try to approach the climate finance discussion through the lens of the effectiveness agenda. And then lastly, we work on nexus of humanitarian development and peace issues, or the triple nexus as it's known, to advance the development cooperation and human rights agenda in tandem, in parallel. And we have, within the CPDE, we have task forces that work on all of these themes. The next discussion would be, or slide would be on where do we do advocacy in sort of something of a prioritization. The first place where we are a CSO stakeholder, the representation of civil society, is the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, where all of these themes are really addressed. Then, of course, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, and specifically the Development Assistance Committee, which is the permanent committee within the OECD that takes on issues of official development assistance and is really the custodian of aid statistics and data. That data was actually just released today, and we should say that has increased year over year, large part due to vaccine donations, or in excess vaccine donations. Then we engage also at the United Nations, the High Level Political Forum, the Financing for Development Review Forum, Development Cooperation Forum on issues of South-South cooperation, and obviously the General Assembly. And then lastly, we try to engage at the multilateral level with the World Bank, IMF, and ADB, especially because of their influence in the delivery of aid and their influence just in general on aid architecture. The European Commission, and we try to engage with other CSOs, build alliances with CSOs in all of these arenas. And finally, my last slide will be how we do our advocacy and how we develop our advocacy after stating all of this. How do we come up with what we're meant to be promoting or championing? And we have 4 pillars really, which fall under what we call the policy cycle. The first would be in any of these arenas or different advocacy themes. How do we set the agenda? What are the issues that we need to look at, and how do we do that? We do that through consultation with the various CPD constituents. Then we formulate our sort of advocacy vision through identifying spaces for engagement, developing different kinds of messages. Once we've developed these messages, we try to implement. How do we, whether or not we've had success in getting these policies agreed, what do we see them being implemented in the real world? I think this is the biggest challenge from my perspective in our advocacy work. And then basically looking at and monitoring and evaluating whether or not we have had any success in implementation, whether or not the policies we've been advocating for are making an impact at the behavioral level. So with that, I close, and unfortunately we'll have to leave in 5 minutes for another meeting that is taking place, but happy to try to answer any quick questions, or I'm sure my colleagues can, Joe or others can step in. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, actually, I was going to jump ahead and say, well, first of all, thank you for that presentation. I bet there are questions, and because Matt needs to leave in 5 minutes, I'll take 3 first questions. If they can be advocacy related, that would be great. And then we can stay longer with the other issues. So looking at what hands are being raised, if any. I guess one question that always strikes my mind in terms of assessing impact for advocacy work, it would be good to hear, Matt, more on how we aim to do that. What are our own strategies? If there are no further questions from the floor. And also, I'm receiving a question through the chat box on maybe in that regard, best practices in the recent years, if you could mention anything.
On the impact, I think one of the we're working especially with our program team, because a lot of this is linked to our deliverables as our CPDE program is directly linked, obviously, to our advocacy objectives. So I think Mark presented a little bit how we intend to do the monitor the impact of our say policy interventions. So it's in close coordination now with the program team and trying to look at what we've set out as objectives at sort of the beginning of the planning cycle, and seeing drawing in feedback through, I guess, through surveys of membership and people or colleagues that we're working with on an implementation level, and essentially doing qualitative assessments. On the more general assessment of the impact of our advocacy at a global level, I think it's a little bit more, I guess, slightly more straightforward in terms of whether or not we see our positions reflected in intergovernmental agreements. And there, as far as best practices go, I would highlight, and I think some colleagues here would know, it's I think it's the fruits of several years of work, and not necessarily specific to the platform, but certainly a result of the platform's ongoing work. There's recently a recommendation at the OECD DAC on how donors support or work with civil society. And I think that is a sort of a one of the best practices in terms of the fruits of our efforts culminating after several years, resulting in a fairly commendable recommendation that has some legal standing, if you will, at the OECD. And so that would be, if colleagues are not familiar with it, encourage them to review that, because it really, you can, if you review it, it's very evident how CPDE and sort of the different organizations that have been working on the issue of enabling environment have influenced the agreement, the intergovernmental agreement. And unfortunately, I do have to leave now. So
thank you, Matt. Yes, sure. I'll share the link to the recommendation you were just mentioning, and I'll open up the floor now for more questions. There is a question in the chat box, but it's in French, so I'll request some assistance to translate that for me to be able to read it out loud. And in the meantime, if there are more questions for Simona, for Mark, yeah. Sunar has got a hand raised. Rup, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for producing such a useful toolkit. My question is, for effective advocacy, we need disaggregated data, but unfortunately, we don't have that in our part of the world. On the one hand, the government doesn't produce disaggregated data across, geography, ethnicity, caste, and other dimensions. And on the other hand, the government doesn't acknowledge the data produced by the civil society. So how can we bridge this gap in our advocacy efforts? Thank you.
Thank you. I was taking notes. Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question. I think I'll take two more and then open up the floor for the answers. I've got MBA Limbingo with a hand raised. Limbingo. Okay, the question is here. It's written down. So I'll read it out loud. Regarding advocacy as well, there has not been a mention to unrest or conflicts, which are among some of the bottlenecks for CSO advocacy. Yeah, that's a good point. Matt left the room right in the boiling point of the discussion. So these two are more related to advocacy issues, and we'll see also how we can tackle them or try to discuss about them. One more question from the floor, or should we open up for feedback already? Okay, so yeah, definitely shrinking civic space. It's our core business, our core agenda, and it's challenging. I don't think it ever gets less challenging. There always seems to be a new geopolitical conflict, unrest, pandemic situation, making us push more and more for that enabling environment. I'm wondering if maybe, Simona, you want to share something from your side on your network's experience on using data, as mentioned also by Rup Sunar, or addressing issues in conflict countries?
Actually, I feel much more comfortable addressing the advocacy question due to lacking personal experience in the unrest or conflict regarding question. So advocacy / data lacking issue. Apparently, this is omnipresent problem, regardless on the question in which area the network or the CSO are working with. I mean, I've seen it in the Western Balkans. I've seen it in bigger EU-based organizations. I've seen it in the field of CSO development. I've seen it in the field of good governance and anti-corruption. So I guess the best advocacy for providing relevant data CSOs can do is provide alternative data. For example, I am aware of examples where CSOs were not able to get information on, let's say, public officials, for examples, or something like that, and by using the freedom freedom of access to public information, many of them have been able to generate data that most of the times does not go in favor of the government. So what they need it's kind of an advocacy effort to get the data that you need to continue to do your advocacy. To be honest, I mean, personally, I have much more trust in the data produced by CSOs. So governments have this habit of disagreeing with the data gathered in that way. So one way or the other, if being vocal enough, eventually CSOs get hurt, and governments start producing or publishing some kind of data because it goes in their favor not to not to go and work and operate with the ones that we have gathered.
Thank you, Simona. Yes, I was also thinking of some collective efforts that are done through CSOs networks and alliances and partnerships. For instance, the progressing report on national implementation of SDGs, which CPDE is part of, and some of our members are also part of. That effort puts a lot of emphasis in analyzing the VNR reports, the ones submitted by the governments, but also the shadow reports submitted by organizations, and even like any other civil society data input. And there is a strong emphasis on also trying to keep track of what governments actually use secondary data or data provided by civil society organizations and which governments do not. In that regard, I think that there aren't much choices, but further deepening our efforts to build that data, to have it present, to build a solid advocacy from data, and to push for governments to take that into account.
I'll only add this if you don't mind, but I guess that this kind of data gathering and working with data calls for strengthening capacities and capabilities about research, data gathering, data input. I mean, in a manner that would be accessible and workable in formats that CSO can benefit from. I mean, data without the skills to read it, process it, and further use it is just numbers and symbols. So yes, I guess the research skills and IT skills are in need of enhancing in this sense, but I stand by what I said. It's doable. I mean, it gets much more effort. It's time consuming, but I guess it's totally worth it since we're here and we are determined to keep on doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. And it's good to know that there are several efforts being done, and that there's also the possibility of reaching out to other organizations and asking about this specific capacity building, or how to build capacities and skills to address that need. I don't see any more hands raised. Does anybody else wants to ask any question? Maybe more related to, okay, we have one more hand. Maybe more related to how to use the guidelines. I mean, that would also be more clear once you have access to the documents. But yes, Mamadou Diane Toure. You can speak now. I might not be saying the name correctly. Okay, we have a comment on the chat box regarding a civic tech initiative. So actually working on this issue. Well, if we won't be hearing from Mamadou, I guess that Rup, if it's okay for me to go back to you, it would be good to know, like, what are your experiences working with advocacy and trying to build your own data
Hello?
for that purpose.
Well, in our experience, what is happening in Nepal is, Nepal is one of the diverse country in terms of caste and ethnicity, and we are constantly asking the government to come up with disaggregated data on ethnicity and caste, so that it can be reflected in the resources and opportunities and budgetary allocation. But government never pay attention to it. As a result, we don't have proportional representation in the decision making, no rightful budgetary allocation in the 3 layers of government at the federal, province, and local level. Due to the lack of data, Dalits are being deprived of their rights and entitlements or resources and opportunities. Though they have been given rights in the constitution and other legal documents, but they have not been translated into action because since we don't have data and we cannot exactly measure what progress has been made in comparison to the last year or last decade. So that's been really the problem. And we try to produce our own data, and unfortunately government doesn't recognize it. They raise question on methodology. Sometimes they they label us being influenced by some foreign agenda, which has really made our work difficult.
Thank you for sharing on that. I bet that the efforts are also being made to maybe foster more legislation on that regard. Maybe if there was some sort of a national law, or there should be, right, on access to information, transparency. But then it might be one of those cases where the law is there and it's not being implemented.
And one more thing, let me just add on that. Every 10 years, the government conducts a census here in Nepal, right? And they collect raw data, ethnicity-wise, caste-wise, gender-wise, right? But they do not process them and come up with the detailed data on caste. They fear that if those data comes out, then people will use them as a evidence to claim their rights. And the UN agencies, they have also produced data in collaboration with the National Planning Commission, and same thing happens there, right? If I have to give an example, the multidimensional poverty index of Nepal has gone down. It has come down around 16%, but they don't have data. How much percentage of multidimensional poverty of Dalit has gone down, right? So they have raw data, but when they publish the data, they hardly publish data on caste and ethnicity, which is the real problem.
Got it. Yes, thanks. It just highlights the need to keep on working to produce our own information, which is definitely an expensive investment for civil society organizations. It not only requires a lot of human resources, it also requires money and a lot of time. I'm wondering if maybe, thank you, Humberto, for joining us. I'm wondering if maybe John Osha wants to share with us what he's sharing on the chat box, because it's on the same issue.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, good everybody. My name is John Oluwafemiola, and I'm from Nigeria. My organization is Act of Africa. So what we do is we work around accountability in governance, and we are trying to ensure that my state in Nigeria, one of the states in Nigeria, which is Oyo State, we are trying to look at a way in which they can adopt open government partnership. But it seems they don't want to adopt OGP because of the level of transparency and the issue of people asking them questions. So what we do is to actually use freedom. There is a law in Nigeria that ensures that you have access to government data. We call it Freedom of Information Act 2011. So we write these FOI requests to federal government, we write it to state government. So through that, we're able to get some information. And most of this information, they are given to us in bulk, and which in the reasons of it, people in the local community may not be able to use them for advocacy. So what we do is to simplify some of this information. We break them down in such a way that even someone who doesn't have knowledge of statistics or accounting will easily understand them. So we give it to the people in the rural community, we bring them together, educate them on what those things are, especially when it comes to budget. We teach them the demand and the supply part of a budget, so that they can ask the right question from from government. So what we do is that we don't lead this advocacy. We ensure that these people themselves lead the advocacy. They are the ones that lead their own. In fact, we allow them to be the voice so that the advocacy becomes genuine, becomes real, becomes personal, because they are the one that knows exactly what they are facing. So we give them, like, for example, on our social media pages now, we have what we post there. We call it Accountified. We put the amount each local government is getting every month. We put it there. So what we do, once we put the money, we don't just put the figure there. We let them know the equivalence of that money, what that money can actually get to buy or implement in the community. Like, for example, if they can get primary health care center, if the money is enough to get primary health care center, if the money is enough to construct certain kilometer of roads. So we do all those things so that they know the magnitude of the level of amount, the resources that are in charge of their leaders, so they can ask the right question. So we actually, in summary, we use FY to get the information, because we believe that you cannot use any other information than information that are official in nature. Two, we get the people to understand the data. Then also we educate them on how to carry out their own advocacy. Then after that, we support them in getting their voice. We magnify their voice. Those are the things that we do around that. Yes, we have challenges, but we believe that network like this can actually help us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That was very interesting. I was left with the thought, if this platform you were mentioning for resource allocation, is that like a technology you bought, you developed, or you borrow from somebody else? And okay. I guess, yeah, very concrete question, but.
Okay, good. We have a particular organization. We have a particular organization in Nigeria. They are well known for working around. Simplifying budget at federal level. But they only focus on federal level, so they simplify information. They don't deal with state government and local government. And if you look at the level of corruption in Nigeria, is actually adopt their own technique, but go down more, break it down to the lowest community, because we even go to the extent of doing it in their own language. Sometimes we do pidgin. We have what we call the hybrid of Yoruba language and English. We do it like that. Then we also do it in Yoruba language because I'm a Yoruba person in Nigeria. So we, in fact, most of our sensitization are always in Yoruba language. So it's our own idea, is we leverage on another person's idea that has been doing it at federal level. So we only domesticate it at state level and local government level.
Thank you. And that's also a good practice of networking, right? Because you're working with another organization. Thank you, John, for sharing. Before we wrap up, I would just want to ask if any of our LAC members attending the meeting today would like to share on their own experiences, doing advocacy work, doing network management, which is also very strong in the Latin American region. I'm putting you on the spot. Any good practices that could be shared? I'm also thinking, okay, Laura, yes, please go ahead.
Sí, gracias. Buenos días,
Laura. Yes, thank you. This is Laura Becerra from the Mexican Civil Association Equipo Pueblo, and focal point for CPDE since the beginning. In the Mexican case, we can say it's not very typical because we come from an experience where we had a legal framework that enabled our participation and recognition as civil society organizations. And with the new government that has been here for 3 years, we have seen a backlash. Therefore, the institutions and the legislation that was recognizing our status is not utilized anymore. And now we are in a moment where we are trying to advocate for our civic space. And therefore, we thought that our advocacy work would be more focused on public policies that we deem important as civil society organizations. However, what we needed to focus on was on defending our own space and our own rights. And now we are giving priority to the advocacy of civil society organizations, civic space. Therefore, we have left aside some other advocacy themes that are very important for our population. But the Mexican experience is very rich in terms of political advocacy with the executive, with the legislative powers as well. And I believe we can share many things. And what we have been doing from Equipo Pueblo is to develop the capacities of our organizations. But we believe that if we can't build a dialogue, we can also do advocacy towards the public entities and also public opinion, because sometimes the government is trying to reduce the civic space of civil society organizations. But if the general public knows about us and about this situation, they can also do advocacy for us. And I wanted to mention this, and I hope we can collaborate with other colleagues that just spoke, because I believe we can also do advocacy with the public opinion and position ourselves. We can write letters, we can have other means of communications in order to advocate for all these situations. Also, in terms of governance and the society and the citizenship that sometimes is not organized, and we can help them organize themselves. Anyways, our experience from Mexico is very thorough and very extensive, but This is all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Yes, I think that what you're mentioning is very relevant to the work that's done, especially in the current context where there are so many issues in terms of media information, the news, and as you were also mentioning, civil society organizations should also represent the part of the society that's not organized. And so putting also the spotlight on the public debate, on the public opinion, and how society in general understands the discussions. It's as important probably as trying to pass a specific law or trying to get a specific program to be approved. And it also helps to build citizenship, right? Which is also we are good for today. It's been an hour and a half of a very interesting, constructive lunch. It's always a pleasure to touch base with everyone and get to share our experiences partially, but at least together. So I'll give the floor to Jodel Dakara, our network manager, to provide some closing remarks and kindly ask you to stay for the last minute so that we can take a group photo if you're able to turn on your cameras. This should not take more than 4 or 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Joe. Thanks, everyone. Again, thank you and congratulations to everyone behind this event and the materials we have just successfully launched. Indeed, as mentioned throughout the event, the materials capture the collective experiences and knowledge of CPDE and our partner organizations in doing network management, program management, and advocacy and engagement. Actually, there is one more material that we are to release in the coming weeks, which is actually a module on conducting dialogue with development partners. No? So through this event and the materials, we hope to convey and encourage CSOs and development practitioners to strengthen capacities and our resolve for effective and transformative development that serves our constituencies. Apart from that message, this event also poses the question, how do we build a community of practice? Reflecting on this question, I wish to highlight the following as some ways forward for the platform and our members and partners. First is continuous lesson learning and action reflection. Second, to contextualize the lessons and discussions we've heard to our different needs and realities. Third is to move from theory to practice. And fourth is fostering interconstituency collaboration and exchange. These ways forward are actually easier said than done, but the materials we present here, as well as your global secretariat, can provide guidance and support for everyone to realize the things mentioned above. Again, I invite you to always visit our website, www.csopartnership.org, for the materials and announcements on the activities as we celebrate our 10th year anniversary. On behalf of the Global Secretariat, I thank you for joining today's event and wish you success, especially to constituencies and members conducting their own trainings on the topics that we've just discussed. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Joe. Over to you.
Thank you, Jodel. Sorry, I did not turn on my camera. Can we then just take the last minute to open up our cameras and take our group pictures? We usually do this. It's a way of, replacing the group picture we will take if we were having this webinar face-to-face. So we will give people some minutes. I can't seem to view the screen properly. Who's taking the picture from our amazing comms team?
Maggie, go ahead and mag-take.
Okay, we're here. There's already some open cameras.
One.
So I can say 1, 2, 3, but I'm not sure if somebody's taking the picture.
Meg is taking the photo.
Okay, so on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Do we need another? Okay, 1, 2, 3. So I think we're good, Meg. Do we get the faces?
Yes, I think we're good.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And
Thank you, everyone.
thank you, and hopefully everyone will
Gracias.
find good use to the development materials shared.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.